Divorce lawyers of Reddit. What is the most ridiculous reason your client filed divorce for? Story 1. I had two couples come to me. They had been friends for nigh on 15 years. Husband A decided he liked wife B more than wife A. Wife A decided she likes husband B more than husband A. The reverse was also true. And husband B preferred wife A. Wife B preferred husband A. The couples had near identical assets in terms of value. They came to me all together, and I drafted two sets of paperwork. Two default judgment hearings were set on the same day. The judge signed all the papers the same day. A week after that, they all went to a JP and remarried. The husbands swapped houses and they all went about their lives exactly as they had the week before, but each slightly happier. Edit: no, this was not Rob Lowe or a picture in the 1970s. I'm only 34. No, I have never read, seen or heard of Marmalade Boy before today, but I will look for it to read next weekend. No, I probably don't live or work in your state. Story 2. Not me but my friend who specializes in family law. Wife wanted to divorce husband because he kept taking their dogs for walks while she was at work, making it unintentionally so they'd rather cuddle the husband instead of her after a long day. Story 3. Divorce lawyer here. One client filed for divorce because he owed his bookie $70,000. He didn't want to leave his wife but he figured he would get half the house in the divorce, which was worth $700,000, and pay his debts. He had already blew through their life savings gambling. He was the worst guy. Story 4. I heard of a woman that had her marriage annulled because the groom insisted to bring his mother on their honeymoon. Then, on the honeymoon, the bride discovered the reason he wanted to bring his mother was to breastfeed him. Yes, the groom, a grown man, was still breastfeeding. Story 5. My boss just got divorced. His wife was telling people one of her reasons was the amount of toilet paper he used. She was a super coupon clipper thrifty lady and would listen when he went to the bathroom to see if he was using too much TP. Story 6. My neighbor filed for divorce because he smacked his lips when he ate and slurped his coffee and soup. She thought if she didn't she would end up in jail for battery. Story 7. Not a divorce lawyer, but have done marriage therapy. Had a soldier stationed at Guantanamo Bay that met a local, fell madly in love. They decided to get married so she could come with him back in the States once his tour was done. She was working on American dishes, and was making spaghetti. He comes home from work one day, and she's making it. She puts the meat in, puts the canned sauce in, and then pulls an unlabeled bag out of the freezer and adds it to the sauce. At this point in the session she's hysterically crying with broken Spanglish. She's trying to explain she didn't know any better. Through the hysteria he informs me her mother and grandmother told her if she wanted to keep her man, she needed to put her menstrual blood in his food. It was so hard to keep my composure. I was trying hard not to gag. They both described they were madly in love, but he couldn't let it go. They ended up getting a divorce. Having done this for 14 years, I have found it 100% accurate that truth is stranger than fiction. Story 8. Not a divorce lawyer, but there's this famous case that all law students know about. The wife asked for annulment of marriage, because almost a year into the marriage, they still haven't had. The husband has been avoiding it for almost a year, and later on the court found out that he actually only has a 2-inch penis. Story 9. My mother-in-law divorced my father-in-law so she could have a fresh start with her dream job of teaching blind children to read. Turns out, what she meant by that was destroy my father-in-law's pastor career by telling everyone he was abusive. Got married to the guy she'd secretly been carrying on with. He's a convicted child offender. She has grandchildren. She's in a state of complete denial. Story 10. My dad split my mom because she takes too long to tell a story. He was actually having affair 47958093774, and that came out shortly after, but this was one of the main reasons he gave when they did a counseling session together. Story 11. He didn't help her put up a shower curtain. It may have been a straw that broke the camel's back situation though. Best reason: cops showed up to tell her that her husband is a violent child offender and she's now aiding and abetting. BC. Her house is next to a school. Story 12. Not a lawyer but a friend is. They said the husband wanted a divorce because the wife still wiped the of the perfectly healthy and mentally able teenage son among other things. Story 13. Lawyer here. One of mine that sticks out is that the husband and wife both played some sort of online role-playing game. Sort of like The Sims I think, but a little more elaborate and adult. Second Life maybe. I don't know anything about online games. The wife got heavily involved with the game, like 10 hours a day, and wouldn't reduce her time playing no matter what he said. What tipped things over the edge however was that he set up a fake profile avatar and went online to stalk her in the game and found her avatar having with some random guy's avatar. Nothing ever happened in real life. Neither of them were exactly oil paintings to look at, but that was enough for the guy to initiate a very acrimonious divorce. Story 14. I'm not a lawyer but my brother is one who specializes in family law. He once had a case where the client was divorcing his wife because he was having an affair with his wife's mother. Edit. People keep asking me if the wife's name is Stacy. I have no idea. This case happened in the UK, a few years ago I think. Edit. 2. Electric Boogaloo. I'm stupid and don't understand humor. Story 15. Not a lawyer, but did spend 6 months costing legal aid cases for solicitors in the early 90s. This included many divorces. The most notable one was a woman divorcing her husband because he discovered he could talk to the dead on their honeymoon and then later spent all their money on spiritualist groups. That wasn't what made it notable. During the divorce, the woman left the house. At some point her husband approached her and claimed that as he was letting the house fall into ruin, it would be better for both of them if he sold the house and split the proceeds with her. She agreed to this without consulting her solicitor. A few weeks later the husband gave her 5. She asked what it was for. It was her share of the house. Head sold it to his sister for 10 and kept living there. When she went to complain to her solicitors, she found they'd done the conveyancing for him. Head deliberately used his wife's divorce solicitors and nobody at the firm had realized. Edit as this is blown up a bit. I'll add a few more details for clarification. This happened in Wales. I wasn't working for a solicitor. Solicitors would send files to us for costing. I have no legal qualifications. All I needed to do was be able to count and sort documents and apply the fees for work done. The house sale would have taken place about 1989 to 90, while the UK was in recession and house prices were falling, which may be why the woman agreed to the sale so readily. Most of this story came from the notes of the final meeting between the woman and her first solicitor. I don't know if she took legal action against that solicitor. That would have been a separate case. As I said elsewhere, I don't remember how this was resolved. It's more than likely the husband didn't get away with it. Story 16. Not a divorce lawyer. One couple that I am close to were in the process of filing for divorce. Papers were served and lawyers were involved. But the husband put down for one of his reasons why things were irreconcilable was because she would in his bathroom. I'm sure not exactly in those words. Happy to say that they worked through that issue and are still together. Story 17. Estate's paralegal here saw a divorce where the defendant stopped cooking, and when the petitioner gave the defendant money for food aids, so was phrased as housekeeping money, the defendant would disappear for 2 weeks and play bingo. The defendant also lost interest in the child. The bingo comment and stopping cooking comment will forever be ingrained in my head. Edit clarify roles of parties. Story 18. Not an attorney but a paralegal. This isn't why they filed. But the guy didn't think his wife should be able to divorce him because she had Lyme's disease. He thought that having had this impaired her mental facilities and therefore she was not in her right mind to make this decision. We were just the GL for the kids, so every so often we would get calls from him going on and on about this. Story 19. Heard this one while mobbing for deployment. Guy signs over power of attorney to his mother before leaving. As soon as he was out of the country, mother files for divorce of the wife because they never got along. Dude is in the middle of the desert and didn't know until he came back in 3 weeks after the fact. Edit for those of you in disbelief that anyone other than a spouse would be given POA. It is a lot more common than you might think. Could be for a number of reasons and none of those have to do with trust issues. Story 20. Not a lawyer, but 2 stories. Wife wanted to divorce her husband on their wedding day because he fought with her father over the bill. Another was a woman who divorced her husband of a week because she's been in love with someone else for several months and found out the other guy loved her too. They're married and have a kid together now. Story 21. Not a lawyer, but a friend of mine divorced her husband because his was too big. They were dating about 6 months, got a courthouse wedding and separated about 6 months after. She said it was fun at first but it became too much work. She said it took a lot of preparation. Apparently, as well, he was pushing for some but stuff. When she first told me offhand, I refused to believe it. She showed me a picture of them dancing at their reception, and holy was this guy packing heat. Story 22. A friend of the family got divorced by her husband because she couldn't outperform him on the golf course. We all think he was cheating and just wanted an excuse, but she did say he would often yell at her in public while golfing and mock her for her attention to detail, whatever that means in golf. He would also force the family to go golfing on most weekends, so it's hard to say if that was the real reason or not. She doesn't even like golf but was, and still is, afraid to tell him that. Story 23. My dad has been married several times, more than 4. His last wife asked him to rub her feet and he said no. She told him to get the out. He was super excited and said okay bye, you'll hear from my attorney. Obviously that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Makes me laugh every time someone asks why did they split up. No feet rub for you. Not a lawyer. In my 20s back in the 80s, I met a friend's friend who married, ended those marriages not sure how, divorce or annulment for fancy parties, wedding receptions, money gifts, wedding gifts and vacations, honeymoons. She would get married and immediately upon return from the honeymoon, end the marriage and off to find the next guy. In the 7 years or so that I knew of her, she'd been married 4 times. Story 24. Hopefully soon to be former divorce attorney. I've seen tons of crazy reasons for people to get divorced, some of them stupid, some of them make perfect sense. I had one person get divorced because her husband wouldn't take her out to the movies anymore. I had one client who looked through her husband's phone and found out he was hiring male escorts while he was on business trips. One female client got a divorce because she hated with her husband. Her last relationship before she got married was pretty intense and I guess her husband just didn't match up. I've had a few clients who were teachers get divorced because their spouses found out they were having indecent relationships with students. All of the teachers were female. One divorce involved an elderly couple who had both recently been widowed. They had both been married to their individual spouses for over 40 years. They married each other out of loneliness. About 2 years into the marriage, they realized they made a huge mistake. They couldn't stand each other. It was weird seeing 80-year-olds complaining about the same thing you see kids arguing about. Story 25. My wife divorced me because I had her arrested for domestic assault. She's in childcare, so it was absolutely imperative that she control the narrative. Apparently I am a liar. The cops are liars. The children are liars. The baby gate smashed itself over my back. The video of her doing these things are also lying. So divorced I got for hanging out with all these liars. Story 26. Not a divorce lawyer, but I read about a divorce on a weird but true site where some guy insisted on a divorce because his wife fed him pumpkins instead of a more expensive counterpart. Story 27 easy, she spent $42,000 on psychic hotlines. Notable, she then wouldn't accept any of our offers, and I continuously asked her lawyer to provide counteroffers. Shouldn't her psychic have told her how the case would turn out? Story 28 not really what you are asking, but my sister's old friend had a big wedding and about a month later she accidentally butt-dialed her husband while she was out to dinner with the dude she's been sleeping with. Seemed like an act of God. Story 29 not a lawyer but happened to a friend. He woke up really early one reason because middle age, so while he makes coffee he checks the lottery numbers and they didn't hit a single number, realizes he needs milk for the coffee and runs to the corner store. Starts to buy lottery tickets for the next drawing and comes up with what should have been a funny idea. He buys another ticket and plays the numbers that had already won the night before. He goes home and puts the ticket on the fridge where the other ones were thinking she will have no reason to pay attention to the day they are for. Hour later wife gets up and makes some coffee and he yells from the living room that he hasn't checked the lottery numbers yet and for her to see if they won anything last night. He hears her use the laptop to check the numbers and then she is quiet for a minute. He said he had this big grin on his face waiting for her to start yelling they won and thinking how funny it would be. I actually think fake winning lottery tickets, and the prank he was pulling, are mean, but that is beside the point. She yells from the kitchen that they didn't win anything. She heads back upstairs and 15 minutes later she comes through the living room with both their elementary age kids in tow and says she forgot to tell him she had to go to her mom's for the day and was taking the kids and just leaves. He was shocked, went and checked, lottery ticket is gone, not in trash or anywhere else. He realizes she thinks they won the lottery and she is trying to run off with the winnings. She won't return calls or talk to him and when he calls the house the grandma will confirm she is there, put the kids on the phone, but that is it. She finally shows up with the kids a couple days later and just walks in the house and says F you and walks into her bedroom and won't talk to him. Kids confirm that mom thought she had won a ton of money, realizing what kind of person she is, and that she also isn't very smart to think she would have gotten away with it. He divorced her. Probably not a ridiculous reason to divorce someone, but ridiculous behavior that would cause you to divorce someone. Story 30 Ianal, but a friend was getting divorced from his then wife for reasons. She decided she wanted to sue him for breach of promise, even though they had already been married. Too much Bronte sisters, I guess. The lawyers must have had a laugh over that. Story 31 I guess I'm late to this one. It was my associate's case, but he had a couple in his office arguing about all the things they disliked about each other. All of a sudden the husband started screaming at the wife about leaving stains in the toilet. It was the reason, but it was hilarious. Story 32 Well, Mickey Mouse was married to Minnie for about 2 years. He wanted a divorce because she was really silly, and it was getting on his nerves, or as he put it, Minnie was goofy. Story 33 I'm the product of a divorce. My parents finished who got my brother and I in 6 months. It took them 3 years to decide who got the cats. Not sure if that's what you were looking for though. Story 34 My mother-in-law divorced my father-in-law after 36 years of marriage and him caring for her with a chronic illness and being a great father to her 2 sons from a previous marriage, as well as his own son with her my husband, and her reason was because he didn't pay attention to her. He is on the autism spectrum and was working 3 jobs to pay for her shopping addiction. Her real reason, she met a guy at a bar, started sleeping around, got approved for disability and moved out the day her back pay was deposited about $20K. Needless to say FIL was completely taken off guard by this. She had never told him anything was that wrong. He thought they were happy. She doesn't talk to my husband or I anymore because when we found out she had been cheating on FIL we found out because she demanded hubby meet new guy after the divorce. Hubby said no, and guy yelled at MIL for making him look stupid. New guy yells at her. She tells us things about him that make us worry a bit. She was in an abusive relationship when she was 16 to 22 with a guy that almost killed her. She has scars on her neck from it, and met FIL a year after she had finally left. We point out that new guy seems abusive and encouraged her to be careful. Yeah, but divorces. FIL is now happily married to a lady from his hometown in Mexico. MIL is no longer with guy she left him for. Story 35 Husband and wife were married for 15 years, and husband started being less and less intimate with wife. He cheated on her with another woman, and his rationale was that he didn't know if he was impotent or it was just his wife and wanted to find out. Story 36 Uspez. Not quite an answer to the question, but a lady at my Catholic church who's heavily against divorce and helps with marriage counseling actually got a divorce herself. Funny thing is there's another lady at my church with a similar story, except unlike the first lady, she's not an. Story 37 My mother divorced her third husband because she caught him soliciting gay on Craigslist. This after he had a 4-year affair with her married best friend. It got so bad that he took their 3 cats to the pound and my mom had to pay enormous fees to get them released before their 24-hour death sentence was imposed. She was 55 and he was 67. He filed for elder abuse and won. He also won punitive damages because she wrote, cheater on her check memo line for his monthly alimony payments. My mom ending up giving him every cent she had, and lost the house her and my 14-year-old brother had with him. They were married for 12 years. Story 38 Not a divorce lawyer, but my shitty former uncle did requested specifically the 36-pack of double-ply Charmin Ultra Soft toilet paper, and his toothpaste, edit pun not realized. Story 39 My friend got married to a guy and they were both going to schools in the same town but now the same school. One day months after they were married, she didn't have classes and decided to surprise her husband by visiting him in campus. Except when she went to the office to find where his class was held, she eventually finds out he's not even enrolled. We still don't know what he was doing or what he did with the tuition money, pretty sure gambling, because he refused to ever say. Story 40. A Nigerian woman divorced her husband because his penis was too big. Story 41. Question for those who start with not a lawyer. But, you're saying your story anyway. Telling people you're not a lawyer has no effect whatsoever. Why do you say this? Story 42. One of the two had a problem with the IRS. Divorcing would shield some assets, as long as they were awarded to the other party in the divorce. I don't know how it was supposed to shield assets. And client said they lived apart a lot. I didn't want to look into it too deep, in case I ended up in some sort of fraud. I made client give me enough info that it was plausible they could divorce. Also, there were the airline pilots in the news a while back that were about to lose some of their pension, but if they got divorced their ex wouldn't lose the benefits. Turns out that marriage fraud is a thing, but divorce fraud isn't. They gave their spouse the retirement, but stayed together like they were still married. Brilliant. Story 43. Have a friend, was married about 20 years, found out her husband had proposed to a woman he met online, and had never even met in person. She was done. Story 44. Reading this stuff is really changing how I view marriage. Why do people need to supply other people with the reason they want to get a divorce? And why is it possible for their reasoning to be invalidated? What even is marriage? LMAO. Seems like a very strange thing to me that someone's relationship with another person has anything to do with the government or law. Can someone save me a trip to Google and explain? Story 45. Not a lawyer. But this is our morbid family joke. Both of my parents acknowledge that the straw that broke the camel's back for them was a night when my very health-conscious father was making carrot juice in the kitchen after the kitchen was remodeled. He didn't clean up a small spill behind the juicer and it seeped into the new white countertop and permanently stained it. Now my siblings and I scream whenever someone mentions anything about drinking juice. Story 46. My mom doesn't take too long to tell stories though. My dad is a narcissist and can't stand having to sit and listen to anything that doesn't have to do with him. Story 47. Husband was making methamphetamine and broke into the house, yet she still didn't want to divorce him because he had lung cancer or something like that. Story 48. Not a lawyer, but my great-grandfather who died after 3 wives had married his second wife the day he was to sign divorce papers with the first. Great guy. Story 49. This is too late to the party, and am not a divorce lawyer, but my brother got divorced because he used the internet for banking, religious couple, and she went to a speech that said the internet is the devil. She asked him to stop, but he needed to use the internet for work functions. Aghast that he had an uncontrollable addiction, she took the kids and fled the state the next day. We thought the whole time that there was a deeper issue, that she was just using the internet as cover, but nope, the proceedings are over, and that's what she claimed in court, when she was going after everything he had in custody. She thought it was a slam dunk. Story 50. Related, but when I found out that a certain faith allows for divorce if the word is simply said 3 times, and one of the parties felt that they had legitimately divorced by doing this. Story 51. What you should be asking is what's the most ridiculous thing one spouse has accused the other during or after a divorce in order to hurt them. Regardless of your belief, the answers will probably convince you there is not God and that we need a plague stat. Story 52. My MIL divorced my FIL because he ate a sandwich. She got crushed relatively speaking in the divorce because she couldn't get a decent lawyer to take her seriously. Story 53. Not a lawyer, but the electrician who did all the cables and in my house went through a tough divorce. Wife just got up one day and said she wanted a divorce for literally no reason. Like, she actually had no reason, just left and didn't want to see the kids anymore. Years later she accused him of domestic abuse and got the kids. Poor guy lost his business, his house, and almost lost his second marriage trying to win them back and prove his innocence. Finally got the kids back. Died of undiagnosed prostate 2 years later. Story 54. Was low-key hoping to find my dad's lawyer write something on this because he is complete scum and his lawyer probably thinks he's the shittiest person to walk the earth. Story 55. Not a lawyer, but an ex-girlfriend's mom 50 years old divorced her husband to see my ex-girlfriend's best friend 19 years old female. They were sus on the situation, so I recommended they put an iPhone on record in the mom's car for a day and listen to the conversation, which was basically the 19 years old female saying leave your husband and let's get away together. Story 56. Know of 3 different incidents where the reasons for divorce were more or less the same. In each case the woman married a well-off guy, went off to study abroad and then ditched the husband to live a more carefree independent life. They all came from educated modern somewhat affluent Asian families, but for some reason we assumed familial pressure the women were compelled to get married in order to be able to go abroad. Then once they managed to go abroad they left their husband. It's pretty messed up that they feel like that's their only avenue to fulfill their dreams. Story 57. My first high school principal's wife came out of the closet and ended up divorcing him to be with another woman. No idea on the details. He was a total, so it's difficult to feel sorry for him. Story 58. Almost filed for divorce because my husband claimed our kids on his insurance. And so did I in an accidental miscommunication. Then, we were both unfortunately outside of the period to make changes, so we were looking at having a year at least of him having to pay the family rate for his insurance, and I would too for the same 2 kids. The divorce was less than the overpayment we were looking at, and if we divorced, the life event would trigger a reopening of the enrollment period and we could fix it. Luckily, he just begged the people at his work and told them he was an idiot and they eventually fixed it. Story 59. With the advent of no-fault divorce, it really doesn't even matter, and you don't have to declare a reason at all. 50 years ago you had to in some states. Story 60. I am a mortgage underwriter and often have to read divorce decrees. There was a header one time that referenced the hot dog incident as one of the many reasons for divorce. There was no explanation as to what occurred in the incident. This was a few years ago, but it still bugs me. What happened during the hot dog incident? Story 61. Why do you need to file a reason for divorce? Here in Sweden it is not needed. Seems like the whole US divorce system is designed to make lawyers rich. Story 62. Have any of the lawyers on here been a part of one of the cases where a husband will sue the wife after waking up the day after their wedding and seeing her for the first time without makeup? I would love to hear one of those. Story 63. I annul, but my uncle bought my aunt a new car. He signed it on himself because of taxes. She wasn't happy about it. Asked divorce and faked injuries to get restraint order against him, all in front of her own CCTV system. Crazy. Story 64. Most states have verbiage required by statute when filing for divorce. In California you have to have irreconcilable differences. That's why in every California celebrity divorce case TMA says they cited irreconcilable differences. It's the only cause you're allowed to cite. Story 65. My so has threatened to leave me on the Friday of the last 2 bank holidays unless I spend the entire weekend cleaning and tidying while she gets a rest. I've arrived back to the office today pretty much shattered. She slept for 3 hours on Saturday afternoon and went to the zoo on Monday. At this point it's obviously routine, so I think I'll pack my bags on the Thursday before the June bank holiday weekend and get a well-earned break by myself. Story 66. In a California divorce it doesn't matter what the reason is, but just to answer the question, one petty reason in my opinion anyway was because the wife was upset that her husband of a few years did not want to convert to her newfound religion, Jehovah's Witness. Story 67. Our marriage was on the rocks for infidelity, and we had allowed our marriage to hit rock bottom due to neglect and lack of respect. We had spent thousands of dollars on therapy and our marriage had still not improved. Out of desperation to not destroy the lives of our 3 precious boys we came to Marvel Speltum Plegmail.com. We went through a challenging Dr. Muna spell that taught us strategies to learn to forgive, to communicate and work on the hard stuff. We left our past issues with the grace of forgiveness. We walked away with a renewed commitment to our marriage and Dr. Muna has been so helpful. Story 68. Okay, so I don't really have anything to add, but I'm growing concerned that some of these may be breaching attorney-client privilege. Does it actually work that way? Story 69. One time a very distressed wife came to me asking to get divorced with her husband. He wasn't with her, so after a little bit of talking I asked her, "Does your husband know about this?" To which her answer was no. After I asked her the reason for divorce she broke down crying. After I calmed her down, she insisted she couldn't tell me the reason, but after comforting her with a can't tell cops bullshit, she finally came out telling me that her husband was a big meth cook and killed multiple people, blew up a nursing home and is making her launder money for him at a car wash. Story 70. I recently had a client, let's call him Mr. M. Mouse, try to file for divorce because his wife was crazy. She had no record of mental health issues whatsoever, so I will have to tell him on Monday that this does not constitute grounds for divorce. Story 71. Since when do you need an actual son to get divorced? I'm pretty sure I could walk into the lawyer's office and tell him to make the papers without having any reason as long as both parties agree. Story 72. I worked for wife A in that situation. The difference being they were pub landlords. The wives stayed in the pubs. The husband swapped over. Wife A then decided husband B wasn't all he was cracked up to be, and burned the pub down in an attempted insurance scam. Last I heard, wife B husband A were very happy together. Story 73. Similar situation happened with my grandparents. Granddad had an affair with evil lady. My nan finds out, sells his jewelry behind his back, put disinfectant in his aftershave and then meets evil lattice nice husband, tells him about the affair, actually quite likes him, starts having an affair with him, wife swap ensues. Edit. Oh, this all happened when they were about 60. Story 74 had something similar to this, but it turned into a custody battle. The difference was husband A liked husband B more than wife A and wife A liked wife B more than husband A. They all swapped places and started to fight over child custody. That weird turn of events blew the judge's mind. Story 75. I have seen this happen. Lived in quite a small village at the time, so there was no end of gossip, but everyone involved seemed happy with the outcome. Story 76. I swear this sounds exactly like my favorite anime manga. They all met up again Hawaii years later and found out they liked each other's partner and decided on the swap. Each couple had a kid. They got divorced and lived in Japan. Except because they had kids they decided to get a big house for all of them to live in together. Oh, and spoiler, their children end up falling in love. Story 77. Is your real name Tony? And is your username also the slogan printed on your business card? And if so, can I have one to add to my business card deck? None of them are funny. Story 78. My parents did this basically. Except more drama. That was over 10 years ago. Everyone is happy now, but the two couples still kinda low-key hate each other. Holidays are fun. Story 79. I'm almost certain I know this couple, as there was a while trading spouses situation like that for some teachers in my public school system. Super weird for everyone else, but they seemed like it was fine. Story 80. I'm not an attorney, but I have a similar story. This might get buried. So, husband A was cheating with girl B, who was engaged to guy B. Wife A desperately wants him back, but husband A wants none of it. This dragged on for 1 year. A day after Girl B got married to Guy B, wife A told Guy B about the affair, with screenshots of text exchanges and whatnot. Girl B was distraught, moved back to hometown for a while. Now husband A wants to patch things with wife A, but hey, things are going fine with Guy B, so she wants none of it. Fast forward a year or so. Wife A and husband A got divorced, and husband A eventually married Girl B and had a kid. Meanwhile, wife A and Guy B are still dating. Story 81. As soon as I read nigh on 15 years, the reading voice in my head changed to Grandpa Simpson for the remainder of the post, and because of all the swapping as and BS, it made the story seem like a Grandpa Simpson story even more. Thank you for making my afternoon better. Story 82. I knew a couple who had a similar situation, only not so pretty. They were both sleeping with the other couple's spouse. Both couples divorced and married the other spouse. Things went wrong when the one woman got pregnant with her new husband. She already had a kid with her ex-husband. The other woman couldn't get pregnant. She ended up trying to hire a hitman to kill the other woman, and went to prison. Story 83. Oddly, that's the second time I've heard something like this happening. Not sure if it's a thing or just complete fluke. Lawyer BTW. But I don't do family law, so the clients were those of a friend from uni. Only difference is one took a few months for the whole process due to English law having certain waiting periods for a divorce decree, and two wives were cousins. No kids or any financial issues, so as far as I know it went through fine. Story 84. This exact same situation happened to my aunt and uncle, and I guess step-aunt and uncle. I don't know the specifics because it happened when I was very young and didn't understand these types of things, but they totally wife-swapped and are now happily married to each other's partners 30-ish years later.